Hey, Ayoto. Just wanted to let you know that we're live.
Oh, right.
Yeah, welcome.
Thanks.
How's uh how's London?
Yeah, it was fun. I had a really good time. I was I was being I was like fake Steve Aoki every two steps. Everybody thought I was Steve Aoki. I couldn't walk two steps without being asked.
That's wild.
Yeah.
All right, so we'll get started just to respect people's time. I wanted to begin with a moment of silence for the civilian casualties in major wars today, particularly in Palestine, Sudan, the Maghreb Sahel region, Myanmar, and Ukraine. So we hold the victims in our thoughts, in our hearts, the relatives and their friends. I also want to acknowledge all the listeners, everyone that's tuning into the live stream right now. Thank you for supporting underground independent art. I believe, and I think Iota does too, in the healing power of music. So obviously we do this because it is good for us, but it's also good for you, the listener. And there is no music without an audience listening. So as such, it is a collective and beautiful experience, even when we're solitary and listening with our headphones. It's still a community experience. So I want to begin by introducing you, Ayoto, my dear friend Ayoto Ataraxia, friend and comrade. I want to congratulate you on the group show. You're showing some of your photos in London. So if anyone is based in the UK, where can they go to check out their work?
It's showing at Saatchi Gallery uh, in the city. Yeah.
So Ayoto is really, you know, transdisciplinary artist, kind of the way I like it. He's a photographer, you're a photographer, a filmmaker, a composer, an author, a podcaster. Did I forget anything? That's pretty much it.
A fake Steve Aoki.
So a man of many talents, including impersonating famous people without knowing it. Um, so anyways, let me just talk briefly about the structure of the live stream. So I'll begin by introducing the album, and then I'll try to briefly, introduce the tracks, but we'll get to listening, and then we'll free associate a little bit and move on to the next one. And that's pretty much it. So as y'all can see, this is the cover art for the album. And let me just make sure that the live stream is working properly before I go on.
Is there a chat function or somewhere that I can also see?
Yeah, that's a good question. So, okay, so I did confirm there is a chat function, yeah. All right, so we're good to go. The audio is working fine. I confirmed with someone. It's good to confirm these things because, you don't want to go on and on and on and then
For
find
sure.
out later that it's not working. But yeah, this is the cover art for Architect of Truth, with a tentative release date in August. Um, this photo was taken by Connie, my wife, partner in crime. And the tentative release date is sometime in August. I think I put it as August 2nd, 2024. Um, and as you can see, all tracks composed, arranged, performed, and produced by myself. There are some features from a number of people that I want to acknowledge. So Coney actually did the cover photo, but she also does vocals on one of the tracks from the Outtakes album. Nicholas Quintero, wonderful guitarist. He's featured on a number of tracks, such as The Source, Jehuti, Portals, NYE, and Whiplash. Mark Bingham, who's very much an inspiration to me, a wonderful artist. If you haven't heard of him, check out Social Climbers. It's a band, an album from the early 80s that was ahead of its time. And big fan, reached out to him, and he was so kind to contribute guitar on this track, and that's why I called it The Return of Social Climbers, to kind of pay homage to his project. I do have some text here, so I can briefly read it, and then we can get started. So Hail Jehuti, architect of truth, give me words of power, that I might write the story of my own becoming. So the architect of truth is Jehuti, known in Greek as Thoth. And then in Greek mythology, this ancient Egyptian god who invented writing, wisdom, science, was transformed into Hermes. And I believe the Romans transformed him into Mercury. But the original pronunciation is Jehuti, so I try to stick to the original ancient Egyptian one. The album is inspired by him in many ways because he's kind of like a big other figure, especially for me in this period. So it's a way of saying that this is just more than myself, right? It's good to recognize that as subjects. So Architect of Truth is about navigating midlife. It explores reconciling with one's past, transcending limitations, and embracing lack. Failing again, failing better, as Beckett says. It was originally titled Being Twisted, Thinking Wizkid. The album reflects on the struggle of being a divided subject between the body's physical constraints, especially due to chronic back issues, which I have many of those, and the seemingly unbounded nature of the mind. As an Egyptian composer living in the US, I am deeply passionate about producing music for the aesthetic experience of sonic jouissance, heals and sublimates one's suffering and pain, leaving sonic traces that mark the traumatic real. I resonate with Frank Zappa's sentiment that music is the best, for the musical act transcends the limitations of the body, becoming a conduit for translating ideas and affects into the material form of sonic sculptures that evoke desire in listeners. So I'm really excited to share this with everyone, kind of previewing it at this point in June, and especially with my dear friend Ayoto, who's a composer that I admire, an artist that I admire. So it's wonderful to do this in conversation with you. Do you have any questions or thoughts before we get started?
I just want to say thanks for bringing me on board. Question would just be, do let me know if my mic cuts out. I haven't really solved this technical issue. I think somewhere in my rig, there's some rat out there somewhere, like you experienced last time. So just let me know if I'm just blabbering. But other than that, I'm excited to get going, to listen to your album, Robert.
Thank you. And kind of just to briefly talk about process, we're going to start with The Source here. Some of these tracks are things that I have composed and performed recently. Some of them are old compositions that I've been reworking over the years. The Source is a good example of one that probably I composed 10 years ago. And then, it just like kept lingering until I felt like it reached a level that I'm happy with. So we'll start with that one. And this one features me on guitar. The album is mostly instrumental, mostly keys, keyboard, synthesizers, but this one actually features some guitar. So we'll start with this one.
What an opener.
Yeah, thanks. I love this one. And so the solo here is Nick Quintero. All the other guitar parts and synths, the drum machines, all that is me. But yeah, um, if you have any questions or associations, we can do that now.
So you said this was from 10 years ago?
The composition, yeah, like the main composition is old, but then I rework it and change the arrangement over time until it reaches a level that I'm happy with.
And it's really nice to have a shelf of goodies that you can kind of go back to. I've I know we want to talk about process also another time too, but like I feel like that's it's something so, also with time, because like I was just coming back, I got back last night, and this morning the I was listening to some music, and like music, both receiving and giving and producing, sometimes it's like a conduit that it strikes, it's these kind of walls that I try to like put up and congeal. I guess it's all these things I don't want to feel.
Hmm.
So I wonder for you, like, 10 years, there's a lot that goes through that. And like,
Hmm.
what was it that brought you back to this composition?
To be honest, like I'm kind of obsessed with archiving, especially I think artists probably are like a bit of it is you can kind of brush it off in a simplistic way as narcissism or self-obsession, but I think it's something deeper than that. I was actually thinking about this idea from Frank Zappa where he talked about this concept called conceptual continuity. And sometimes he would refer to all of his compositions from you know, the 50s until the early 90s when he passed away. It's all one big note, he would say. And one of the fascinating things about his work is that you find a lot of themes and variations. So I guess it's like no one knows our own, like no one, the artist is the one that knows their work the most, right? And so obviously we're familiar with our own archives. And I've been making music for like probably 24 years, something like that. I started in early 2000. And I don't believe in this progressive model that somehow my music now might technically sound better than it did 24 years ago, just because I got technically better in terms of sound engineering and things like that. But the ideas for me, and this is, I guess, the maybe the Hegelian or Platonic kind of angle, the ideas, I'm obsessed with this thing that maybe when I was 20 years old, I had a really good idea, but I didn't know how to express it. But maybe now I have the tools to revisit this idea and present it in such a way that it's digestible for the listener. But you know what I'm saying? So it's like for me, music is abstract. It's like the idea is done, it's complete. I get it. But am I able to express it in such a way that someone can actually get a sense of that? And that's the hardest part, this kind of materializing the idea and then translating it. Um, so I keep doing this all the time, basically. Like this is my process all the time, is revisiting things all the time, trying to get it better. And I see Zappa the same thing, and that's why it's inspiring for me to he could have like something that he did in high school, a composition, and he's revisiting it throughout his career. And you can hear multiple iterations, live versions, you can hear symphonic versions, you can hear electronic versions. And I do all of this, and sometimes I feel like it's deconstructing the self in a way. I have examples here of pieces that were composed in a very traditional way on the piano, but then I decide I'm going to completely destroy that and go with a very abstract arrangement that you almost feel like, what is this? How was this done? It almost sounds like uh, it's completely done through synthesizers. So, anyways, long answer to your question, but that's basically kind of a microcosm of my entire process.
Yeah, it's the time thing. I mean, I think that's also very indicative of like psychoanalysis too, or the unconscious, and with music, like, you know, the way that that track was structured, but also not just in itself, but like how you brought it back and repurposed it here. Um, you also mentioned it in the introduction about what was that thing about the return of the social climbers?
Yeah, so Social Climbers is a project by Mark Bingham from the early 80s, I think 81. And in many ways, it kind of prefigures sounds that would later be associated with Tortoise, a band like Tortoise, and like, and it just like it was so ahead of its time. And I talked with Mark about this. I interviewed him. I was like, he said basically it was so ahead of its time to the extent that basically the band wasn't successful. The music, wasn't
Yeah.
appreciated, and obviously that's a question of time too. What if you do something that's so radical that people don't know how to listen to it, but then it was made in 81, you listen to it in 2024 and it sounds amazing, you know?
Yeah, that's a real that's so interesting. I find like my kind of the way to process. I knew this guy, and he would say like, oh my god, like that was just so insane. Like I have no idea what that was. I love it. And he had this approach to everything. I think it was this thing where with his haircut too, like he went to get his haircut and it looked like to anyone else, it seems like, he's got chunk in his hair. And, but he said, it's the most amazing haircut I've ever gotten because I could have never described this to anybody to do. And, with music, I mean, you've been sending me some tracks in this last few months, and I think because of the time zone, I get a lot of your content. I guess it's like when you're about to go to bed or in the evenings for you,
Right.
and then I get them like first thing when I get up, or sometimes I'm still like half asleep and I'm writing, I'm journaling my dreams or something with my night person, and I see your stuff and I'm just like, what the fuck was that? And it goes because at that point in my day, like I have no
Right,
defenses, and
right.
I think it's a very special moment. I guess I'm telling you, you've got access to like this very vulnerable moment of my day, but I kind of like welcome that in,
Yeah.
and just got to percolate. And so it's a lot of these things. It's like, I mean, right now I'm working on my film, and there's like one of the theme of the music that I work in there is from the rubbish truck from my childhood, right? Like in Taiwan,
Mm,
the rubbish trucks when they come by, like they blast some like kind of classical European music, but like they put it on media,
mm,
and but and then it's together with the rubbish truck, which I think is great.
mm,
Also with regards to like discussion of like the littoral of like
mm,
the washed up return of semi unrecognizable things, but yeah, like probably kind of dead animals,
mm,
or something from the deep, and who knows what archaeologist is going to come back, and what it might mean for them later, which probably requires like, and that's why I think about time is also very interesting. Like I was going to some talks, and then people would say like, oh, like afterwards we catch up and like, well, what you think of that talk? And one person would say like, I think that person was just talking too fast. There was too many ideas,
mm.
and I was thinking like, what? Like I was too slow. And I'm
Right,
not saying
right,
who's right or who's wrong, but like,
right.
it's this like the how do we define time and time
Mm,
appropriateness, and like you see like hummingbirds, and then you got to get these crazy cameras to see like how they flutter their wings,
mm,
and in that perspective, like you see like a dinosaur or an elephant move, and it's like glacial, right? And I was on the plane, and you look over the landscape, and it's like I saw these big shipping container just dragging through the ocean, and you could see like these liners, and you could see these white waves behind them, but from the
mm,
plane, like they look frozen.
mm,
I'm thinking if I'm on the ocean there right then, I think I would just be first I would be panicking,
mm, mm,
but there will be so much happening, and these ships, they're actually quite fast and they're moving all these things, and but from above, and I'm traveling through the sky like at least 500 miles an hour or something, and it just seems frozen. So all these like different contextual observations. I wonder. It's interesting that you're able to have these archives and then work. Because I'm curious how this album's going to continue now.
Yeah. No, I think I could say a lot, but I probably should play the second track so the audience can enjoy some music.
That
So
was
in a
like,
way, sorry,
yeah.
go ahead.
I was thinking I would describe that track as like it's like Egyptian hard vapor. Yeah, like that hard Phrygian kind of
Right.
scale with this like some kind of yeah, really vibing with that kind of neo
Hmm.
vapor wave Egyptian. Yeah,
Yeah,
that,
vaporwave is fascinating as a genre, honestly, because I never thought about it consciously, but I think I mentioned this to you before that my stuff has been labeled as such. I
right.
guess because of nostalgia, and we talked about that too, and nostalgia is related to time as well. It's like everything is related to time when it comes to music anyways. But I was thinking when you were talking about your kind of associations on time, and in a sense, the source and Allah is the same thing. So it's like the time really pass, you know, um, but it's like a different reiteration that's more specific. Source is kind of more general, more vague. Allah is like a particular reiteration of source. But time is relative, right? I mean, and space and time are one thing too. So we can't just talk about time in this way that's detached from space. And that's where the body comes in. That's where enjoyment plays a part, memory, all of that, right? It's all but subjectivity is a big part of it. So you can just look at time objectively.
And why Allah for this particular track?
Um, I think you know, obviously being from Egypt, growing up not Muslim, but you know, I grew up actually Christian, but in a somewhat secular family. And but growing up in a Muslim majority country, being, you know, exposed to that culture, whether it's Arab culture or Islamic culture or Egyptian culture, and internalizing that, you internalize that sensibility, that aesthetic, and so it becomes part of who you are, even if, you know, um, but yeah, it's kind of like a spiritual meditation on the name. So the name becomes in a way a mantra, if you will. But this is something you find in a lot of Sufi music, just repeating the name of God. It's a form of spiritual practice, it's a meditation, right? Um, and it's powerful in and of itself, whether you're a believer or not. That's the beauty of it.
Yeah, the spatial aspect of this track was also it kind of build from the last one too.
Mm,
And I think given we cannot take anything out of the context of what's happening,
mm,
um, and especially right now, I think it's just also interesting with regards to like the preface of religion or the fact that whether or not is secular or not or what our
mhm,
person identify, it's like kind of what's been going on with like this year was just like the panic was like the whole time like okay, but you condemn Hamas.
right.
And aside from all of that, like it's like what is the larger unspoken contextual pressures. um I was writing an essay this morning, and I was just riffing on also thinking about adieu, and of course you speak French, like, but
Mhm,
to referring to God.
mhm,
But it's something that I think like in the Western tradition, people not only do not kind of have to or reference the religious or the secular aspect, but that it's so invisible in the embedding of everything that people are not even aware, and but not having to kind of reiterate um, what is or what it isn't. And so here I feel like the that intensity and the heaviness is also like for myself, like sensing the conflicting different social commentaries and different invisible superegos of like the immensity of what this is about, not so much even in your music, but like what this elucidates
mm,
in the modern year, right? Like as a secular Egyptian or not
yeah.
playing in which context are we talking about? So that I was really vibing to as well.
Yeah, and I would say, like on the question of the secular, I think where there's a conflation, it's like secularism is conflated with secularization. I think what we hear about is secularism as an ideology, as a particular Christian ideology, as a European ideology, but we don't hear much about secularization as an endogenous process that could be imminent within any given culture. So like what would secularization look like in Egypt or in Taiwan, right? Or for indigenous folks in the United States or on Turtle Island, etc. So that's an important conversation too. So the secular is a cool conversation, but it's like, are we gonna go in the direction of ideology or is it something else that's more open and interesting? And that's where I lean on the second side. Shall we go to number 3?
Let's do it.
Melancholic Joy. you. I want to share something funny. So the source, actually, that concept comes from a book, an alien abductee book that I read. Supposedly, this is an account from someone, an Australian French farmer that was abducted by these aliens from the ninth plane called someone called Thao. They're called the Thayubans, and the book is called the Thayuba Prophecy. So they talk about that there are 9 planes of existence. Earth is on plane number 1, the lowest one, so it's kind of like hellish level. And then these aliens are from like level 9, most advanced, most sophisticated, most spiritually enlightened. And then the level beyond that is the source of the universe. Or so that's their way of and they're supposed to be like, teaching this to this guy called Michel Desmarquet. So it's funny, like when I reflected on it, it's like in a sense you can read the whole album as about God, but in different reiterations. And it's funny because I think of myself again as secular. But the third one, melancholic joy, obviously Allah comes from Islam, and melancholic joy is this concept that I came across in conversation with my dear friend Chaim. I don't know if he's tuning in, but it's Shabbat today. But this is a concept from Judaism, particularly Kabbalah. And I think it's a beautiful concept that really captures this composition. That there's a beauty to melancholy. It's not, when we feel melancholy, we shouldn't run away and take something in order to feel better right away. But there's something to tap into and to find the beauty within that. And so the concept of melancholic joy is also a form of it's kind of a spiritual concept, if you will.
Well, I'm all about this title. I mean, my book, Sadness of Pleasure. And yeah, I love the title. This track gave me goosebumps. When I was listening to it, I was thinking about, so I had this, like, when I was in my undergrad, I had this professor, is an Italian man, and it was trying to, like, now I think I had so many revisits of this memory, I can't really have it really correct, but I think he was trying to implore on me the importance of congruency. And he was like, it was all about having things congruent in your career, in your portfolio, in what you do. And it took me like another 10 years to undo that teaching and to kind of free myself from that. Like, so, I was at the group show just now too, but, and the works that was there was not curated by me. And which is fine. I think it's also interesting for curators to come in and then we can have a dialogue about that. But people would say like, oh, this is very you, right? And I'm thinking like, of course, maybe other people see you better, but I'm like, what's me? Like, and then, that's all right. That's, people can say things. But then the funny thing is when I start doing different things, it's like, oh no, that's not you. That's not you. Like, so it's like, and right. So there's this quote going around these days from I think I saw it on the Lacan Circle of Australia from Agnes Varda, saying like, life is not a dialectical idea, it's a lived contradiction. And that's what for me felt really freeing from that track, was just these different contradictions that were engaging and ongoing. And then that you bring up this this Thayuba prophecy, that's great. I'll put this on my list. Read this. It's got great reviews.
Oh, it's one of the best books I've ever read in my life. Let me say that.
It's incredible. Yeah, it's got great reviews. People are just, oh, there's what and then I always love, oh my God, there's also I just checked it up on Amazon. It's 4.5 on Amazon, 497 ratings. So it's got like a whole stack of 5 stars, right?
Right.
And because I'm in Germany right now, it says top reviews from Germany. There's 2 of them. Both of them have 1 star.
These are the top reviews.
From Germany. The first one says a scam, bad writing, worse ethics. The second one says political garbage. but the rest, like from the English speaking countries, it's
Yeah.
like 5 stars. Like simple, short, easy to read, great adventure, muy buen libro, excellent book. I can't wait.
Well,
I can't
actually,
wait.
shout out to my friend Ahmed Safa, who's actually tuning in. He's translating the book right now into
Oh,
Arabic,
fantastic.
and we'll try to get it published in Egypt, hopefully. He's worried that it's controversial or whatever, but I think it's cool. But the person, that is making it happen too is Mr. Samuel Chong, who is the Chinese translator of the book. And so there's a lot of, we can do a whole podcast just on this book. So we
Yeah.
won't get started on that.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other thing that kind of was making me think about all of these you know contradictions
Mm,
was that I mean, especially now with the internet, and we're all kind of like pathologize his ADHD and see. But what I think about those, like, let's say, also how on Instagram, so going back to my initial riff about just like you're supposed to put a kind of congruent thing, and like as they say, like you wanna grow your audience or something. You gotta be consistent. You gotta
yeah.
you gotta post at the same time. Like, who the fuck came up with these ideas? And
Capitalist for sure. I mean,
absolutely. And
yeah.
and then at the same time, like today, what we're seeing, and actually, ironically, thanks to this kind of so-called horrible system of social media, like it's kind of managed to squeeze its way through this violence of chaos that we've been kind of shielded away, because what are we, like, grown children that can't handle, right, all these different things. And so when I was listening to this track, or like the last tracks already, like in general, I mean, also worked in music video production and so forth,
Mm,
and also just like always wondering like how does imagery,
mm,
music come and play and interact.
mm,
And here I was just, it's just these explosions of both horror, the terror, the sublime of the world,
mm, mm,
at the same time. Like this, it's there's a kind of like, yeah, there's this, the volume of the sound that is coming through. So it's, and then how do you hold it all together? And it is this kind of melancholic joy, this
mhm,
revolutionary act of, in spite of everything, to still daring to feel all the different emotions.
mm. Beautifully said. So number 4 is Jehuti, and that's the architect of truth. And so this is the ancient Egyptian god of writing, and I'm actually going to be doing a research right now, writing about him. So he's kind of a central figure for me right now. So this album is kind of like the aesthetic accompaniment to my scholarly work in a way. So this is another like that's like the source is an older composition probably from 10 years ago that got rearranged and reworked over time.
It's a vibe that yeah, it reminds me of some Taiwanese music somewhere like there's I don't know enough about some musicology wise,
Mm,
but what I find interesting is finding these peculiar connections of um, smaller cultural kind of music events that seems distant and unconnected. Um, I wouldn't want to say it's hitting on some universal things, but it's a certain vibe.
mm,
Um, but I was just reading about some things about Djibouti and Djibouti, excuse
mm-hmm.
me, and yeah, this thing about the pursuit of forbidden knowledge and potential dangers of misusing such power in the Book of Thoth. How do you
Mm.
pronounce that?
Yeah, that's the Greek Thoth as the Greek form of Jehuti.
I see.
Yeah.
Well, I'm curious about your new research.
Yeah, I mean, so just to give a preview, I'm working on a third book in a trilogy which started with decolonial psychoanalysis and then followed by Freud and Said. So I'm working on the third book that would kind of close that trilogy. And it's on liberation psychoanalysis. And a centerpiece is Jehuti. In a sense, kind of like the way Freud goes back to Oedipus, the myth of Oedipus, or the tragedy, if you will, if we think of Sophocles. Um, it's I'm trying to go back to Jehuti as, you know, a beginning related to psychoanalysis, not the only beginning. We can begin in different places. Freud began with Oedipus. Lacan was interested in Antigone. I'm interested in Jehuti and what we can learn from him, what we can learn from this myth, if you will, and what does it teach us about subjectivity, psychoanalysis, etc. So that's all I'll say. I'll keep it vague at that level.
That sounds exciting for me. Yeah. Even this idea of as the role of the mediator, I think that's really interesting in how it relates to psychoanalysis, to between perhaps a subject and the unconscious, and even the analyst here, and then bring some of these. Yeah, that's really exciting because I feel like it feels so this vortex or this like the gravitational pull of like the Oedipus, um, where how else can we go and find different things? And I think it's really great that you bring some of these research in.
Yeah, and I think it's something about the necessity of the big other, which is obvious in this album. But the big other is lacking. The big other, you can say, does not exist, but in a sense, also very important. But what kind of big other, right? That's the question. And so, Architect of Truth is again a variation on Jehuti. So that's the next track. So far, we've only been talking about God.
composition wise, can you tell me more about when do you decide which characters to bring in and why these specific characters and instruments and
Mm,
when and the voicing too. I heard that was like 2 tracks back. I heard a little bit of you, but
yeah. Um, yeah, this is kind of interesting. Like the way I think of myself, I think of myself, believe it or not, as a classical composer. Not necessarily in the Eurocentric way, but in the sense of like I come up with a composition and it can be arranged in many ways, including in a traditional classical way. It could be arranged as a song, a rock song, and it could be something that sounds like this, which is hard to define really, but when I listen to this, I think of Yellow Magic Orchestra a little bit. Ryuichi Sakamoto, big influence on me. In terms of like some of the sounds. I love synthesizers, obviously. Um, I think because I'm a one-person band, um, I could record something that's more traditional, and probably I will at some point. Because these are my roots anyways. I could do like a more straightforward song with guitar and stuff like that. But um I think this route is actually more difficult because the possibilities are infinite in terms of synthesizers and sounds, and that's the part that drives me crazy. And arranging these compositions and finding the sounds that take me to a place that I feel captures the idea, basically. Um, but it's a long process and it drives me crazy. And but I feel like when I listen to it, I feel like I'm happy. Like this is probably these are the right sounds for this composition, at least in this form. Um, but it's not super pre-decided, but I do obviously have certain sounds that I like, and you can probably see a pattern already.
it's interesting you bring up Yellow Magic Orchestra too. And yeah, the 8-bit and the 16-bit kind of
Hmm.
sound, and also the relationship with video games. I
Yes.
remember there's one video game I played. I don't remember the name anymore, but it's the usual kind of Super Mario setup, like
Hmm.
2D linear kind of,
The best stuff.
right. Yeah. And but this was like a not like the big hit like Super Mario or something, but there was this it it was like now that I think about it, it was mixing all these different things. So like I think the character itself was like a maybe like medieval cliche trope of like a knight or something, and he's got a
Mm,
sword and he's gonna go across. But there's also a lot of these Egyptian, Oriental kind of cliches,
yeah.
and the same thing with like Sonic. So
Mm.
my mom didn't want me to get too much into video games, and, but I did manage to get a Sega with just one game, which I think for her was like the least offensive, was just Sonic, and and so I played through that thing like just all the way to the end. But they
Yeah.
would have, they would always have like an Egyptian chapter,
Yeah.
and it's interesting how then that transcribes like because usually it's like the same kind of setups, and then they do different themes and
Right.
different things in different levels. But yeah, like that for me is very much one of the notes. Which so when you
Mm.
say classical, I mean classical for when, right? Like how does that relate? Like so, this for me is already getting classical in a sense in relating to the video game genre
Mm.
timeline.
No, that's a great reference, and you know, you I'm so nostalgic about the 80s and 90s and these sounds that we grew up listening to on Game Boy and Nintendo, and I had a Sega Saturn, and talk to my wife, like I bother her with like soundtrack music from these early games all the time. Like I keep playing for her Daytona USA soundtrack. And what's fascinating about it is Japanese composers writing this music that would be that was blasting in these American arcades. And so you have Japanese composers influencing American culture in this subliminal way through obviously not just because also in Egypt I was like a big into arcades growing up, and it was a way for me to bond with my father who's actually tuning in. So my dad used to take me to arcades all the time,
Right.
and it was like the best bonding experience. He would be like, he used to smoke at that point. He would give me like the money, 20 pounds or something, and I'd be playing for a while. He would be smoking and just waiting for me. But I think a lot of the passion for music obviously comes from music, but also comes from gaming and from these soundtracks, and loving those sounds, and not looking down on them as something that's less, but actually looking up to them as something that's really amazing and that had a huge influence on our subjectivities.
Yeah, I think a lot of the pop culture, it's not just that there are no issues with it, but I think with regards to how it relates, I find it always so fascinating because the way that they would perhaps occidentalize
Mm,
contents and stories and so forth, but and
mm,
then mixing. So it's like the way that they would take like an Occidental idea that is Orientalizing, and then there's so much remixing that by the
right.
time it comes out the other end, it's really its own thing again. And like,
Yeah,
what is it about? Like, and so I think this is also interesting when people say like, oh, they're like whitewashed or something, and the like the manga characters are just like everybody's white and they all want the big eyes, but and then it turns out like actually no, like the references were about cats. Like they weren't trying to be white people; they were trying to be cat people, with the eyes and the
right.
ratios.
Yeah,
So yeah, this whole cat worshipping, maybe it's even like the religion of the cats.
right. The Kami.
Yeah.
So the next one, Sun Ra, obviously a reference to Sun Ra. Um, Maybe we can think of him as a wonderful jazz composer, but also as a deity of sorts. He thought of himself as a deity. So again, we're still sticking with the theme of deities. But the inspiration behind this one was there's a documentary that just got released about Sun Ra. Um, or maybe I saw a restoration actually of Space is the Place. I'm trying to remember. There's a documentary that was recently released about Thelonious Monk, but this one actually I saw the 4K restoration of Space is the Place, the film that he made, which is a really trippy, surreal film. If no one has seen it, I recommend it. But his approach to music is so open in terms of like the how he plays, the approach to improvisation. I always try to have jazz elements and improvisation in all of my compositions so that it's not super rigid. So you'll notice that there's that opening, but he's so open to the extent that he doesn't care how he plays, and I tried to channel that in this track because I'm not usually that open when I play. I think scales. I think, I want to play the right notes and the right time signature and all of that. But Sun Ra doesn't think that way. Sun Ra is like expressing himself in a very raw way in the moment. So I try to capture a little bit of that in this channeling Sun Ra, if you will.
Oh, amazing.
Thank you. So it's in a way channeling Vangelis as well. I should probably,
Right. Yeah.
because it's halfway Sunra and halfway Vangelis.
I was thinking, like, as you said, like we're still on the deity, on God,
Mm,
and I couldn't help but think of Charlie Hebdo,
mm,
and with regards to like, and then also of course to reference the beloved Ye, and
mm.
when he says, I am God,
Yep.
and just how triggered people can be. Um, and what's fascinating is that I don't know the precise quotes, but like this idea of like that Jesus is in all our hearts and so forth. It's
Mm,
the church is in everywhere and everyone and so forth. And so there's all these different. But at the same time, if you come out and say something like that, there is this like it's I connect this to Charlie Hebdo because it's this thing of for the for the criticisms against the cartoonist and that it's this the to depict and to make comedic depictions of God and the disrespectfulness and but what is not said I think is also fascinating. I think uh, also it's almost like the other side of when Ye's talking about God, right? Like it's like
mm.
how dare you, like so, and at the same time the so-called secularist seems to be like no, like we don't take things so seriously or something, and but
Right.
it seems to be to me it's like who is allowed and who is not allowed,
Nice.
and what is said or it what's the psychoanalytic move here too, like of even for the phallic or the let's say the masculine power or something, that it has to be kind of hidden or disclosed.
Mm,
And so
mm.
here is like where's the veil, who is disclosing, and in whose name or in what language or from whose perspective, and what that incites in people.
Right, that's such an insight. Who's allowed to be a god to even.
Right.
And
And depict.
speaking of Ye, his album Ye was released today, 6 years ago, which is as some people know, my book is on the spirit of time that people think is the worst period of his life, which for me aesthetically is actually in a way the most appealing. So but yeah, what he says, I am a god. So he doesn't say I am God. He says a god with a small g. So even though I'm a man of God, the big G one. So he's saying there's a big G God and there are small G gods, and I'm one of the small G gods, and I think that's legitimate, right? I mean and it's not just because he's famous, because all the celebrity culture and influencer culture, everyone thinks they're demigods and acts on that basis. So it does question secularism, but it does show you also how it operates ideologically, right? So as another religion where celebrities and influencers are the gods that we have to worship, right? And imitate. But not all gods are created equally. And some are more legitimate than others.
What's that? Do you watch One Punch Man?
So I've been wanting to. I've seen a little bit, but I haven't been. I want to watch more, but I'm excited to complete it.
I think my favorite thing about One Punch Man is actually Bill Burr's introduction to One Punch Man. I think it was just such a great mashup and so fantastic. But in any case, within One Punch Man, like just this notion of superheroes, which I suppose, yeah, is can be interpreted also as another way of looking at God or gods. But the economy of gods or superheroes, I think, is just and then kind of transposing that to capitalism and so forth. Just like there's like ranks, and
Yep.
you got to do like exams, you got to be rated, and so here, like when you say like no gods are created equal, and yeah, there's this thing of just there's like loser gods or gods that just like can't seem to get get through, can't seem to get acknowledged, can't even get the jobs because they're just doing everything wrong. But when you said like for Ye that it's maybe his worst period, but again, I think it's so fascinating the way that like the approach of looking at like group mentality, like
Hmm.
how the bigger the group, the less thinking there is as well, and the more one travels down a specific path, um, the more sometimes the crowd thins out. But
Mm.
I mean, I think I think for it's interesting to see what how people are or aren't able to maintain a certain development of thought or process for everybody's own reasons. Everyone's got their own stamina abilities,
Yep.
but it's interesting
Yeah,
to
I
think.
mean, and it's like, especially with Ye, I mean, that specific album is the one that captures where he directly deals with being diagnosed with bipolar disorder. So, you know, uh, people are not comfortable with this kind of subjective truth. They just want ego level stuff all the time, keep it at surface level. But once you reveal the unconscious, it's like, no, no, thanks. Let me move on to something else. So only a few people that really stuck with it, and obviously there are fans for these albums, but they're really worth revisiting and beyond the old Kanye versus new Kanye dichotomy. Okay, so the next one is Satie. Eric Satie, of course, is one of my favorite composers, and this is inspired by him. What's cool about this track is that it really captures two versions of the same idea. And it's a way of me showing that, well, you wouldn't think if I, let's say, separated into two pieces, probably most people wouldn't know that it's the same piece. But it's like how I could start with a composition on the piano and then how it can mutate into something that's more synthetic through arrangement, electronic arrangement.
I think this is really the time of that, right? Like where we and why not? Like we have access to everything all at the same time, and why do we need to still kind of, it's there's a kind of like, as artists, is like, are we really just in the mere act of, widget production? Like, I was listening to some Bach this morning, and
Mhm.
it's great and all, but there's like an exhaustion, um,
Mm,
with regards to just that, and there'll be like 20 variations
mm,
on that theme on the same instrument, and then there's something interesting about that too. But like now, it's, yeah, like this. Let's think about like Indian food. That the idea is that we want to have make sure that we hit all the different notes in the same meal. And who says like we're gonna have these orders? Like, it's like in, so, let's say like Sichuan food. It's like this idea of like you should eat dessert at the end. Like, says who? Like,
mm, mm, mm,
like even this, for like soup is another interesting thing. Like soup, like in the West, like a lot of times it comes as appetizers, but for a lot of Chinese, like that's oftentimes like at the very end, like that's the finishing touch.
mm.
But let's say especially Southern Chinese cuisine, it's like bring on that dessert anytime. Like you intersplice it, and like there's no like big other that tells you have to do it that way. Like, and it works. I think that's so much more interesting.
Yeah, and it's like Italians don't drink cappuccino after 11 a.m. apparently. You have to have
That's
it
right. Yeah.
before. It's like, why? Like, I get very tired after in the afternoon. I need a cappuccino or a latte. Like, so, but these are all the cultural limitations and taboos, and obviously all of them internalize them, but at the same time, we also try to break free from them. But you do, I mean, the limitations are necessary in a way. They're structural, and there's no way of escaping into a kind of super abstract world that has no cultural influence at all at the same time. Don't you think?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, but I guess like the negation also becomes a new definition of culture, of who are we not belonging to. Um, and so
Mm,
it's interesting, like
right.
your reference to Sati, and then your reverberations on that, and then this the weaving of in this particular album of the themes that you've been carrying through. So it's an interesting note to hit.
Yeah, and it's yeah, I think there's something to universal beauty regardless of culture, and at the same time, yeah, the question of cultural expression is just a way, it could be a way of hopefully moving beyond like any form of ethnocentrism, you know. So the next one is called Al-Nahda. This is a reference to a historical period in the Arab world, but the word literally means the awakening.
What's that theme coming from? This it
The white
reminds me.
noise?
Oh,
Sorry,
it
what thing were you talking about?
the theme. It
Oh,
reminds
the
me of
theme.
the theme. It reminds me of It's like something from primary school. Like there's like a teasing aspect about it.
Yeah, it feels yeah, like some kind of like children toy instrument, right?
Yeah,
Like
like
some
a
kind of small flute or yeah.
but there's like a kind of cheerful comedic taunt
Yeah.
that yeah, that kind of spikes in me.
I like that. That's a funny visual.
Yeah. It's-
But I was gonna say, do you get the white noise as well from the streaming? Because I find that interesting too. It adds like a whole like spheric element to everything.
yeah, for sure. But it's really good quality compared to the last
That's true.
the other one. So I do get that coming through. It's definitely it's tying together the whole thing, like the atmospheric aspect,
Right,
kind of
right.
like that's like the final the big other character
The
of all
white
the
noise.
characters, right? Yeah.
And it reminds me of a set that we were watching the other day on Lot Radio from Fortet, where he starts with like some kind of train noise and then bird noise, and then that becomes like the theme throughout. Like he's playing it throughout the whole set. So everything is changing except those two sound, like basic fundamental sounds. So the white noise is somehow holding it all together.
Definitely.
So it slowed down a little bit in the middle with Satie, but then it's gonna pick up again and go more crazy from here. So
Cool.
the next one is one of my favorites, Portals. This is a piece that I wrote for a festival here in Santa Fe called they say Portales, but Portals as well. Um, and yeah, I can imagine it as portals that like interdimensional portals that maybe take you to the ninth planet of Zayuba.
that setup from the one before too makes this like a really nice intergalactic journey.
Mm. Yeah, this is definitely one of my favorite tracks on the album. Shall we move to the next one, or do you have any associations?
I was thinking, something also makes me nostalgic for that album from Sven Liebeck, from the one they did for Life Aquatics
Oh
with
yeah,
Steve Zissou. And
right.
I mean, for that score, it kept it quite strapped with just the Casio.
Mm-hmm.
But what I love about that, and here there's the full kind of orchestration on your part, but the result is still the same kind of like what I thought about that film was that it's a synthetic for a very synthetic artificial creation. There was a the result was a very real, very raw kind of personal translation that comes through. Maybe that's just like having that space for that projection, but that travel quality that comes through, especially in these last two tracks, it'd be great to drive through the car wash with.
Yeah, and I love Mark Mothersbaugh, so he's one of my favorites, and definitely that soundtrack. It's even the soundtrack for Life Aquatic is better than the film. Film is a little
Yeah,
boring, to be honest with
yeah,
you, but the soundtrack is really good. Um, this next one, that's the one that features Mark Bingham on guitar, and he's the one we mentioned Social Climbers earlier. Fascinating project. But Mark is responsible for so many things. He's most famous, like just to give you an example, Shiny Happy People by REM. It's how it starts with the strings. So they called him to arrange the string section. Like he is a veteran producer that, called on by major bands and musicians in the studio to arrange things or whatever, but he has his own music. He's underappreciated in my opinion, and I'm 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 very proud of his feature here.
I'm loving that
What,
return of the dirty guitar in there.
yeah, so what I love about this, I mean, Mark, he's contributing a lot of noise with the guitar, and there are like multi-tracks of noises on the guitar. So it's a very abstract sonic sculpture on the guitar, and I just love how it sounds, how abstract it is, how noisy it is. It's one of the freer pieces, very jazzy, very noisy. So the next two are kind of sister tracks, Amphibian and Wilden. Those are examples of tracks that I just feel in the spur of the moment, where I have like a very quick idea and this urge to record very quickly, otherwise something is gonna be wrong. And these are examples of tracks that haven't been reworked for over a long period of time, like let's say Source or Sati, but more like a quick method approach of like, here's a feeling, here's an idea, can I express it quickly? Amphibian, in a sense, I think is a very visual track.
Well, I love that in the end. I wonder how it's gonna.
And it kind of ties into Wildin. That's why I was like, they're sister tracks because that one ends like all the way to the end, and then this one starts. They're kind of sister tracks. Should I get through it?
Yeah, yeah. I
Okay.
want to see how that continues.
The white noise was heavy on this one for the from the streaming. so it was harder to hear. I don't know how it's coming through it on your end because it sounded very a little bit distorted with the white
Yeah.
noise, but I don't know if it
I have to
sounded
check
that
it
way
out
to you.
later.
Yeah.
You can see the comparison, but I'm into it from here. This heavy Phrygian is taking it all the way to the end.
All the way.
Yeah,
But yeah, this is me just wilding. But yeah,
yeah, it's got
you
that.
can tell my favorite scales.
You could. I think the that emergency kind of work is really the really exciting stuff. That just it's almost like panic.
Yes.
Yeah, gotta get it out, and then if you could be captured like as it was coming out without the neurotic sculptor that comes in later to fix everything.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, those are like the fast ones that capture a vibe really quickly without too much editing over time.
I
So
think it's
in a
pretty.
way,
That's
yeah, more raw.
and then that's kind of the the luxury of having a really well ready system to capture the unconscious when
Mm,
it strikes. Um,
yep. That's why I always
yeah,
have my keyboard next to me at the desk for this reason.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I knew this guy that he like in the the engineers in the studio they have this thing that's always recording and then
Mm,
they could just I think to give up because otherwise it would just take too much space but they delete afterwards like it's like those car cams right like they're always recording
right.
and then you can just say oh that last bit but uh, then he used it to do this one track where it was just all the captured farts and then he EQ'd the crap out of it and they made this like fart song
Okay, I
and
have
all the
to hear
selected
that.
farts.
Do you remember that Kevin Smith story about Prince?
No.
So apparently Prince invited Kevin Smith over to film something. He was a fan or whatever. And Kevin Smith went over to Prince's house and um, he was in the bathroom and realized that Prince records in every single room in the house all the time because he might come up with an idea at any point in time and there has to be a recording everywhere. And so they had like they got into an argument about this or whatever, and the project never got made, but like he talks about it as part of his stand-up routine. So
Oh
yeah,
damn.
yeah.
How interesting.
Prince is very productive. I mean, like he didn't live a long life. I think he died in his 50s, but look at how much music he produced and they're still releasing stuff.
Yeah, always gotta that constant output, always be recording.
But yeah, I don't think I'm into this idea of recording 24/7. I think I want to think of recording as a more special experience, that happens every once in a while. Yeah. So the next one is NYE, New Year's Eve. This one was written on New Year's Eve. Captures what I felt on that New Year's Eve.
It's got that rave vibe with the crowd.
Yeah.
I like that
Solo raving.
you didn't tell me which New Year's Eve this was. It was just New Year's Eve in general as a New
Right,
Year's.
but it's a specific one, yeah.
You're gonna tell me?
So it's definitely the last one.
Interesting.
Yeah, yeah. And I think what I notice is that the bass is the one that triggers the white noise in the streaming. So it adds a whole layer, which is interesting actually to
I have
experience.
to. I'm gonna have to listen to it again after.
Yeah, it will sound like some tracks will sound 90% similar, but like some of them will sound very, very different.
I, the yeah, the vocals. I love it when like these it when this like exponentializing aspect of voices of instruments to kind of scale up the size of it. It's interesting as the album continues because the single synthesizer sometimes can like especially like that Casio sound can be very
Yeah,
almost very like personal, very minute,
yeah,
and
right.
placing
So
it
the
next
the
to
voice elevates it, right?
yeah it's a there's a kind of expansion effect.
Mm, mm. No, I agree. I do love it. I know not everyone hears that sound, but like I have a whole Casio album. It's called Cairo Tone because it's all compositions recorded on the Casio Tone, which is like probably the worst sounding and cheapest keyboard out there, but it just holds a special place in my heart.
It's a nice contrast. Where'd you spend New Year's Eve?
So I think the first part home, but then we did go to a rave and in the evening. This place called Meow Wolf, which is a psychedelic art space. It's a very interesting creative space. It was like a bowling alley, and a group of artists converted it with money from George R.R. Martin, the writer of Game of Thrones, and they converted it into this interactive art experience. So you go in and like there are different rooms with different experiences, and they do music events there as well, and that kind of thing. And the workers they formed a union because they've been treated very unfairly. So they're trying to improve their conditions, the workers there, because obviously the artists made it big that put this together, but then there are all these workers that have to run it and put it together, and you know how it is.
Well, I like the collective sound that comes from this track. Speaking of which,
Yeah. So one more left, and it's a super short one, but it's kind of in a way one of the crazier tracks, and when I like it when I think in a more free way, not in terms of like, because I can do like a traditional song of like verse, chorus, bridge, that kind of thing, but I like it when it's more like a little bit more abstract, but not so abstract that I abandon rhythm completely, but still somewhat abstract. I really like the odd time signature mixed in with like dissonance and all that.
It's a nice outro to it. It's yeah, it's like a start of another.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the remember like when we met privately last time, I was showing you the outtakes album, which is basically
Right.
all the tracks that I didn't include in this one. And all the outtakes are more experimental than this. I mean, this is still, somewhat it's not completely straightforward as an album, but still the I picked the most straightforward out of everything that I've been working on. And so I put together all the ones that were rejected in one. So it'll be a separate album. So
Well,
in a
this
way,
will
it's
be
an
nice.
opening
Yeah.
toward the other one,
Exactly. Yeah.
yeah.
A nice intro to where the madness really starts.
And you heard it, so you know because you heard the version of Blue Dabadi and all that.
Yeah, that's when the vibe kicks in.
Yeah, I mean, so if people want more, they can, I'll release both at the same time. But I think this is kind of the polished version, and we have to kind of do that as artists. Like when you make a film,
Yeah.
you still have to edit, remove things, and put it together, and
Oh
it
yeah.
is what it is.
Hey, that was a really psychedelic trip through the this album. I really love it.
Well, thanks for listening with me. So now that you heard everything, do you have any favorites or any overall reaction to how everything comes together?
Yeah, I think the for me it was really building into the oh, I don't have the track list now, but
Oh, let me share. It's actually helpful.
yeah, I felt like there was this it kind of reminds me of the way that you write as well. Like you've got this huge, like very methodical step by step building of a massive introduction, and then you got your point, but then it's like just it's just there. That last it hits around like 80% in,
Mm.
and it's like, yep, done. And and so there's a same kind of vibe here where it's like there's this kind of this very methodical way of like kind of introducing all these different characters, and then we go on that portal journey, hitting on track 9, and then it just starts getting wild, and then it's wrapped, and then see you on the B side kind of thing.
Right, right. So in a
Yeah.
sense, you're more curious about the B-side. This is like intriguing and like pulling you in, but
Well,
you're like you want to kind of explore the other world as well.
I mean, like when it maybe it's around that time of the day I'm getting hungry. Like I keep thinking about food references, but like in food, like I'm all about the appetizer,
Mm, mm.
and and then it's supposed to build you up for the mains, but a lot of times the appetizers is really where it's at, and it's really building all these things, and of course somehow you can't, it's they wouldn't be co-appetizers if it went for the fact that there is a main. So they do work in tandem, but having it's both a necessary. So you got all these. One defines the other.
Yeah, in a sense, it's like what you negate as well, because it's like, right, it's the unconscious. So in a way, you can say that the architect of truth is like the ego of the subject, the artist. And then you have this B side, which is more like the unconscious. Everything that was negated and repressed, I put it together here.
That's great.
So it's still there, like because like it's a lot, but the more wilder side, and so
I think that's also great to have people to have the B side that people can go listen to without our ramblings, and it's just pure
that's
unconscious
right.
experience.
That's right. So that's actually funny, like how we did the listening experience with like ego sort of interjections, but then the B-sides will be completely ignored.
Yeah,
And
perfect, perfect.
yeah, awesome.
Thanks,
Well,
Robert.
yeah, it's been a great experience. I know it took some time, but
That
hopefully
was
it
an
was
honor. Thanks for
enjoyable.
putting me on this.
Yeah,
Introduce your album. I hope
no,
people
the
people
honor is
get
all
into this
mine.
album.
Cool, cool. I'm